symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Can Chris Hero Save Wrestling? And of course, to answer that question, Mr. Chris Hero. Chris, how are you, man?
I am tremendous, Conrad. How are you?
Man, better than I deserve, and I'm excited to be back here with you today. I really had a lot of fun last week talking about your return to NXT back in 2017, and the feedback so far has been pretty good. What's been your experience?
Yeah, just overwhelmingly positive. I'm really excited to find that so many people have connected with this show and are recommending it to other people. And especially with last week's episode, you know, I guess there's a lot more little interesting bits in there than I would have thought. And, you know, we'll be able to break some of this stuff down into 2-3 episodes to give everything the right amount of time to discuss. 'Cause, you know, it's just been a couple years for me, but I was able to do some really cool stuff and work with some awesome people. So when you do that, a lot of different stories come out, and man, I couldn't be happier to be doing what we're doing. So thank you for that, Conrad.
Well, thank you, man. And I'm excited about what we're doing today because we're doing Ask Chris Anything. And this is really one of my more favorite podcast formats because we get to cover a lot of topics in a very little time. And if you're a little ADD like me, it's kind of fun. So, man, without further ado, let's jump into it. We got more questions than we could possibly answer here. Doug Ritter wants to know, what are some of your favorite Larry Sweeney stories? And I'm sure some of our WWE listeners may not be familiar with that name, but man, he left a footprint, did he not?
Yeah, sweet and sour Larry Sweeney. One of my favorite people I've ever run across in pro wrestling. He was started out as a student of mine. We ended up becoming road buddies and traveled together all the time, and just, you know, like a brother to me. Just, he was younger, but I learned so much from being around him, and we just had so many laughs, so many good times in and out of the ring. Just really a one-of-a-kind guy. He passed away in 2011. But some of these stories are just so fresh in my memory still. And we're just really fortunate that we were able to spend so much time with him. Alex was his real name. Alex was very special, he loved old school wrestling. That came across in his promo style. God, he was just such a natural promo from the beginning, and natural in a different way than others. I don't mean in like a conversational way, but he had that 1980s talk to the camera promo down pat. And you could tell that's the type of wrestling that he loved. He even went up to the Pacific Northwest and spent a little time training with Buddy Rose and Colonel De Beers. Sweet and sour. He wore the pink and purple. His character was actually originally based on a wrestler that we lost last year, unfortunately, Mitch Ryder. Mike Quackenbush had come down to work for IWA Mid-South in 2001, and he saw Mitch Ryder for the first time. And Mitch Ryder is the consummate Southern pro wrestler, and his gravelly accent and just, you know, no frills in the ring, but just a real smash mouth, kick your ass kind of guy. And Quack saw that, and he wanted that essence in Chikara. So he brought Mitch up to Chikara a couple times, and then eventually Alex was training at the school, and he had his own idea of what he wanted to do. And Quack pitched to him the idea of going, you know, a similar route with the pink and purple and the stars and such. And just, that's where the essence of Sweet and Sour Larry Sweeney started. But he was able to take that and spin it around and give his own take on it. 12 large, right? That was a thing that's often associated with him. A funny little story about that. Sweeney, while having wrestled only for 2 years, 3 years at that time, he would work a lot of the independents in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and such. And he'd find himself on shows with guys like Tom Brandy or King Kalua. And he connected with those guys. I mean, those guys were 15, 20 years older than him, but they were like kindred spirits. It's just kind of funny. And there was one time at a show, Tom Brady was working as Tom Brady and as the Patriot, and they were sitting over the gimmick table, and it was looking bleak. They had not made a ton of money on merch that day. I think it was a bunch of kids in the crowd, and Brandy leaned over to Sweeney, and he's like, "You doing okay?" He's like, I sold a little bit. What about you? And Brandy looks at him and he goes, 12 large, brother. And 12 large, you would think that would mean $12,000.
Right.
I do believe that Tom Brady had only made $12 up until that point. So the 12 large came from that. And just another thing, we had watched this old WWF tape from maybe 1985, I would say. And there was a promo with Sergeant Slaughter and questionable undertones in this promo where they were going to wrestle Sheik and Volkov, and he needed to find a partner. So Sergeant Slaughter went down to the ghetto, and he went to a junkyard, and he found the man that was guarding the junkyard, and it was the junkyard dog. And he's talking about him wearing chains and just this whole, we're like, I can't believe they said that. I can't believe they got away with that. But he's just saying these subtly racist things, and Junkyard Dog is just like, yeah. And when he finishes his promo, Junkyard Dog just goes, ain't no doubt about it, baby. And just that funny little bit from a promo from 1985 became one of Larry Sweeney's catchphrases. And it was something that was an inside joke with us, but it was something he took and put his own spin on. And a lot of people watch these Larry Sweeney promos, and you hear 12 large, you hear ain't no doubt about it. You just don't know the stories behind it. But he made it not too inside that you didn't understand what he was talking about it, but he was able to. One last little Sweeney story I'll say is a funny thing that he would do with promos is he would start the promo in the bathroom in a stall, filming the door. You'd hear the toilet flush, and then he would come out of the door and start his promo. He did this a number of times. I don't really know how many times, but it was just always funny. One time he came out of the bathroom stall having just flushed the toilet, and he's eating a Frosty from Wendy's before he launches into his promo. And he's the one that I'm thinking of. He's getting ready to go up to Canada to wrestle for UWA Hardcore. And he had a match against this wrestler with a magician gimmick. The Amazing Blake Stone or the Amazing Blackstone, something like that. And Sweeney is just so Chikara was family friendly, so you could be creative with your insults, but you could not really push the barrier really. So when he did these other shows, he would almost overcompensate. So he's just cutting this promo, and he's like, yeah, when I get my hands on you, fuckface McMagic Trick. And to this day, some of us still affectionately refer to one another as fuckface McMagic Trick. Larry Sweeney.
Gone too soon.
Yeah.
Darnell Willison wants to know, is there a trope that Hero would like to see eradicated from the pro wrestling lexicon? Or maybe one that should make a comeback? So, one thing that I hate, God, pro wrestlers today put so much thought into their work. They put so much thought into every step, every move, every false finish, every it's way more cerebral than it ever was before. Yet I'll be damned if I don't see every wrestling show where a guy belly to back suplexes the guy. He lands on his feet, and the guy goes, well, where'd that son of a bitch go? He's right behind you, what a dumb thing. And also you shit can the guy, you throw him out of the ring, and before he goes all the way over, you turn your back on him. Yeah, there it is. All right, he's out. He's never out. He's never out. Some of those things
are done for those are kind of like house show spots that you can do on a house show because it's just so cliched and kids can understand it. Casual fans can understand it. But at the same time, don't insult their intelligence. I mean, do you really want to suplex a guy and you don't know where the hell he went? I mean, it's physics, right?
Right.
I mean, it would be amazing if you did suplex him and he disappeared. That would maybe be something for Mr. Magic Trick.
I was going to say.
Something I would like to see come back. One, this maybe doesn't answer your question the way you would like it to be, but I would just like to see more wrestling, more actual wrestling, because guys are so quick to kick and punch. And I mean, once you punch me in the mouth, it's hard to go back to just getting on the mat and working in a logical, feasible way. So I don't see why everybody is so quick to get things started. I would like to see more just hold for hold. I mean, some people, it's not their forte, but I would just like to see a story told in the beginning of a match that does not involve kicks and punches, because you can always do that. You can always punch a guy in the face. You can always kick him, but build up to that instead of just doing it. Obviously, if you're in a feud with somebody, that's a little bit different, but I just mean a cold one-on-one match. And then also, I would like to see, gosh, I could go into this and go really in depth into this. I won't at this moment, but one, I would like to see matches end sporadically, just at any time. We're so used to the formula of a pro wrestling match. We know that certain things are not the finish of a match because he hasn't made his comeback or he hasn't made the hot tag. I would like to see wrestlers switch it up and end your match somewhere else in the formula. And I would like to see bookers book that. Not every match needs to be 15 minutes. Not every match needs to be 30 minutes. Of course, I'm the guy that should be told not every match should be 30 minutes. That's a story for another day. There's nothing wrong with a match just ending right at the comeback. Not every match needs a dozen false finishes. And if we try to scale this back a little bit, you are educating the fans that matches can end at any point with any reasonable move. And if you have the patience to see that through over a period of time, you'll start to get better reactions throughout your matches because they'll have been educated to certain things that could be the finish. I mean, so how many times do you see a guy go for a pin and you're just like, well, shit, that's not it. Right.
Yeah.
We need to go back and pull things back a little bit and start to re-educate. That's what I would like to see.
30 years ago, that was the case. I mean, guys were winning with backslides and all kinds of weird stuff, and you don't see that anymore.
No. I mean, you see a schoolboy.
Yeah, every week.
Damn schoolboy. You see the music distraction. Oh my God, whose music is that? You know, it's just, I think it, and it's not just the guys. You have to, if I was booking a show and I had an 8-match card, I would have at least one, maybe 2 matches end somewhere in the heat, somewhere in the shine. Maybe it's the cutoff, whatever. Maybe it's a hope spot. I would just do this over time. And when you're that guy and the booker tells you, hey man, we want you to go 4.5 minutes, you have to have the patience to not want to cram 10 minutes into 4.5 minutes and go, well, let's pretend that we're going 10 minutes, but just end it at 4.5. So wherever we are, let's finish it there. You have to have a trust between booker and wrestler to say, listen, tonight is the night that you're going to go 4 minutes, but I guarantee you there'll be a night where you go 20.
Yeah. Dennis Law says, hey, Chris, I love your podcast. What makes a good referee in your opinion? Who's the best referee that you worked with and what qualities made them great?
Well, I'm glad you like the podcast. Thank you. Referee wise, I've been in the ring with some great referees. Todd Sinclair comes to mind from Ring of Honor. Bryce has reffed many of my matches over the years. I enjoyed working with Rick Knox when I worked for PWG. And, there's a number of referees in WWE and in NXT that I've enjoyed working with. The quality of a good referee is someone that is not in the way, someone that can anticipate the action and not be in the way, and also be familiar enough with both you and your opponent to have an understanding of what's happening. I've had some referees that it's almost like they're being inconvenienced by your performing. Like they're like, oh my God, I got to go down for this pin, or you want me to get out of the way? But then again, I've been in the ring with some referees who are just exceptional people. You want to be able to have someone in there that you can really count on, someone that you have a certain trust with, so that you can communicate with each other easily and not obviously. Oh my God, I'm going to go into a rant here. I'm going to try not to, but it takes me out of it so badly when somebody does something dangerous in a match, whether it's controlled or uncontrolled, and I haven't even digested what's happened yet, and I see the referee over there squeezing the guy's hand and, whatever, and whispering down. It's like, there are other ways to communicate with one another. God, that just takes me. I realize safety is paramount in professional wrestling. It's important, but you can communicate without squeezing someone's hand, especially when the cameraman is right there, especially when fans are trained. Oh my gosh, I see so many tweets like, did you see he caught him on the dive and then he checked on him to see if he was okay? What a professional. It's like, okay, that's cool, but don't let them see your magic trick, man. Have a little more pride. I said this in the last podcast. Hold yourself to a higher standard. I could be in the ring with some of the veterans that I was able to work with, and they could tell me an entire story without unclenching their jaw. They would talk through their teeth and they would communicate with you. And even 10 feet away, somebody would be like, oh man, it looks like he's talking shit to him. Right. So there are better ways to check on the safety of the wrestlers that you're in there with than obviously squeezing their hands, going in to whisper to their ears, etc. It just takes me out of it as a fan, as a performer.
PWO Law says, I remember the heel move used to be the reach for the ropes to break submissions, which was the easy way out, while babyfaces were more likely to try to counter it. That changed at some point. Why? And was that change for the better?
I think that's an excellent question. And I would say that if you are in the opening moments of a match and you are just trading holds like hammerlock, headlock, front face lock, top wrist lock, these types of holds, some people call it chain wrestling. If you go to the ropes during this situation, to me, it looks like, I don't know how to get out of that hold, so I'm going to use the ropes. It's hard for people to get behind somebody that uses that as an excuse. If you just end up in the ropes, that's one thing. But actively grabbing the ropes when you could wrestle out of something doesn't look like a very good babyface to me. Even if you are the most brawling brawler that's ever stepped in a ring, if you're a babyface, you should know how to counter basic holds, and you should figure out your own way of doing it so that it makes sense. Again, these things are different if you're in a feud with somebody, but I'm speaking generally. I would say the change happened with the advent of UFC because we started to realize that normally doesn't take 15 minutes in a chin lock to put someone away. You can choke someone out in a matter of seconds. You can snap on a cross arm breaker, Fujiwara arm bar, and you can put someone out in moments, right? So in that situation, you're a babyface and you're in the ring with a heel Kurt Angle, right? And he grabs that ankle lock on you. You're not a coward for grabbing the ropes. You're grabbing the ropes because that's your refuge. How do I get this guy off my ankle? He knows every counter I'm going to try. I'm going to roll through and he's still going to have it. I'm going to kick him off. He's still going to have it. But if I grab the ropes, the referee's going to make him let go of the hold. It builds that drama and you don't look like you're taking the easy way out because they know that he could snap your ankle and you don't want that. Right. So I think that changed somewhere. I think also Taz Mission, that was a big one. Ken Shamrock's ankle lock, which preceded Kurt Angle's. It just sharpshooter, also the slow crawl to the ropes or passing out in the hold, etc. They're just different ways for it. If I am giving advice, I would tell a babyface to exhaust every option before going to the ropes. But if it's a dire situation like a finish, get your ass in those ropes, get out of that hold because you don't want to be hobbled.
Let's do another one here from Human Garbage Disposal. What a name that is. He says, what do you believe is the place for squash matches in today's wrestling world when so many fans of non-WWE products think every match needs to put all the participants over and allow them a chance to show off all of their signature spots?
I think squash matches are still important.
Yep.
I think it's a way, I mean, not everybody needs squash matches, but you definitely need some talent that the audience may not be super familiar with, and you give them a match, hopefully against someone that has a little credibility. If the person has no credibility, the squash match isn't super effective. So you want to give the audience a taste of what this performer is like, what type of moves they do, what's, how fast they are, how strong they are, and then also from a production aspect, you want to see what this all looks like. It's not just moves and a finish. It is, how does he look on camera? How do they look on camera? How are we able to capture this person's personality in between the moves that he's doing? So I think squashes are very important. You don't need a whole show of squashes, and you need to put some thought into them. It's not just, hey, go out there and massacre this guy. But I think if you have the right performers and the right producer, the right booker, they absolutely have their place. I mean, I just mentioned a little bit ago that I think matches should be more spontaneous and less predictable. And I think a squash match is vital to that. And there isn't just one type of squash match. There's like 100% squash where it's like the Road Warriors used to do, where they run through one guy and then they just kind of show off some of their moves. Then they pitch him into the corner and the poor guy, he tags himself in. And before he's even in through the ropes, he's getting beat up. But you also have the Ted DiBiase squash match where he's wrestling Louis Spicolli, and he's going to make sure that Spicolli gets a couple roll-ups or a crossbody or something like that you're like, oh my gosh, this guy actually has something, so that when he does get the victory, it just pisses you off a little bit more because the guy had a chance. There are just, many different percentages you could look into it with a squash, whether it's 80-20 or 70-30, etc. It's funny, everybody says that, but what exactly does that mean? Are you are you calculating the moves? Are you whatever? And then I think somebody puts that down on a piece of paper and they give it to the talent, and it's up to the talent to figure it out. So they don't always figure that out in the right way. Gosh, we would go over, sometimes you call them get over matches as well. It's the same thing. We would go over them sometimes because you get so used to having a 50-50 match with an opponent where everybody's pretty generous and you want to do your best stuff, but you also want to give him some of his best stuff, right? But there's a certain situation where that is not conducive to what you're trying to accomplish. So
Yeah.
everybody just has to be on the same page. You have to have an opponent that really wants to put you over. You have to know that just because you squash this guy doesn't mean you're deliberately squashing him to make him look bad. He's there to make you look good. It's a bit of a lost art. But also when I say that, you go back and you watch stuff from the 80s and early 90s, and there was no real art to it. They were just kind of beating guys up, and you'd be like, man, I don't think that guy is trained. Yeah, he just hit that guy for real. That guy's definitely not trained. There's a funny Tully Blanchard one where I think the guy he wrestled is not smartened up, because this guy just keeps kicking out of his stuff and he just keeps getting right back up. And then Tully eventually, I think, just drops an elbow on him and pins him. And then the guy finally stays down. So then Tully picks him up and he hits him with the slingshot after the match, which is like, he didn't want to risk it on the guy that's trying to shoot on him. But yeah, I love squashes. I think they should be more regular nowadays, more often. And then I also think they should be produced a little bit better and more directly.
Matt has a great question. He says, one of my favorite matches is the Hero Jack Evans Pro Wrestling Gorilla match, where Hero said Evans couldn't keep him down for a 1, or maybe it was a 2 count. How did that match come about, and what did Chris think about it? Why hasn't it been done since?
Another good question. I'm very happy to talk about this. There are actually a couple YouTube videos where this gentleman, I am blanking on the channel's name at this moment, but if you put my name and Jack Evans, you'll see it come up in YouTube search. But he breaks down a match I had with Jack Evans, and then later a match I had with Darby Allin, which had the same concept. So I trained with Dory Funk Jr. at a couple of his camps in 1999 and in 2000 down in Ocala, Florida. And I don't remember the context of why he was mentioning this, but Dory said that on some shows back in the day, when they would have maybe an NWA title match in the main event, that the entire card, no one would kick out at 2 unless it was the finish. Like you wouldn't get to a 2 count unless it was the finish. So everybody's kicking out at 1, kicking out at 1, kicking out at 1, 1, 2, 3, finish, right? So after 4 or 5 matches of this, the audience knows that when the ref hits 2, he's also going to hit 3. Right. So you would save those 2 count near falls for your main event, which was the title match, which would kind of get the fans in the right state of mind for what they were watching and just to react in a certain way. When you have so many false finishes in a match, you deplete the energy of the audience, and you have to have a really special performer or a special match to get them back after that energy dump, right? I'm sure we've all seen it before, where there's a match that just kills it, and then the next match goes out and it's like, it's a bit of a lame duck. The fans are just burnt out. They're just tired. But I'm sure you've also seen one where the next match takes it to an even bigger level. So that thought process was in my head, and I was in the Battle of Los Angeles, which is a tournament. I had 1 match on one day, and then I was having 3 matches on the 3rd day because I went all the way to the finals. And when you can't top something, you want to do something different, right? I may not always have the best pro wrestling match on the show that I'm on, but I want to do something that is memorable so that people can go, oh, I remember this from that match. So it can be a certain story that you tell in the heat. It can be a certain false finish that's really good. Just body part selling that is realistic and people think you're really hurt. There are just different things that you can do. And what I thought was I wrestled Biff Busick, Oney Lorcan in my first match that night. And my way of making that match different was I jumped him on his entrance, which hadn't been done all tournament long. So I just attacked him right out of the gate. And then this match with Jack, I pitched it to him. I said, listen, this is going to sound crazy, but I want you to kick out at 1 on everything. Kick out at 1 on every single thing. And then I will have 1 false finish where you kick out at 2.9, and then the very next thing I do will be the finish. So we're basically building all the way up until that 1 really good false finish that we're hopefully everybody's going to bite on, and then we're going to take it home right after that. And initially he thought it was dumb. And he eventually came around to the idea. And it's funny because whenever I see Jack now, he calls me the sage of pro wrestling because of my sage wisdom and advice. And it started with just this match that we had because it worked. Something that Jack did that I did not know until watching it back on DVD was Jack was in his style. He's like a babyface. He just does these incredible things that it's really hard to not get behind him. He's just one of the most athletic and unreal performers I've ever been in the ring with or ever been on shows with. But he had it in his mind to go out and cut heel promos before every match. Earlier that night, he had gotten destroyed by Brian Cage. He won the match, and then Cage just decided to destroy him a little bit more after the match. So he comes out, and he's got like bandages on and stuff, so he's already like a wounded warrior. Yeah. And then he just cuts this promo and just disses everybody in the crowd, and then says like, I'm so good, like Chris Hero won't even get a 2 count on me. So he gave away what we were going to do, which you would think it would affect the match, but it didn't. I would have preferred he didn't, but in the end game, it doesn't really matter. So we go out there, we do a little stuff, whatever. First time I cover him, he kicks out at 1. Oh, okay. It happens a couple more times. And then eventually I'm like power bombing him. He kicks out at 1. I'm taking his head off with an elbow. He kicks out at 1. And then it turns him babyface because they just want to see like, oh my God, wow. And they're, it's just this interactive thing with the crowd where they don't know if we're doing it on purpose, but now that they're in on it, like we're all on the same team. And it just, we got a really good reaction with that last false finish where he did kick out at 2 point whatever. And then I just rocked him for the finish and won. It wasn't the best match of the tournament, but it was a different match, and I'm very proud of that. I had a match with Darby Allin at Evolve as Cassius Ohno when I had gone over and done some shows for Evolve and did the same thing. Darby did not cut a heel promo on the crowd telling them that I couldn't get a 2 count on him, but just with his style, his like kamikaze daredevil style, it worked perfectly. I wish we would have been able to have a longer match or have more matches, but it was another fun one where I just get to destroy my opponent, right? These guys are Jack Evans and Darby Allin. These are 2 guys that you can beat within an inch of their life and they just kick out. So if you want to look up those videos on YouTube, you can pop them in there, and they've got some clips. This guy's got his own little take on it. And it was a very fun thing. It's funny to correlate an anecdote from Dory Funk Jr. and then use it with Jack Evans and Darby Allin. Wrestling's crazy.
I don't know how you'll answer this one. This is a bit of a broad stroke question, and you might have to take a stab at it. Jeffrey Pollard wants to know, do you think Vince McMahon is out of touch with today's wrestling scene?
I don't think. Now, I do not know Vince personally. I have met him a couple times, but I'm speaking from my perception of what Vince is. So I don't have any inside knowledge. I don't think Vince cares to be in touch with today's wrestling. I think he has his mindset on what type of product he wants to put out, and he's doing his best to continually put that product out. And when certain numbers aren't met, he's like, well, we got to change something. What do we have to change? And then, he has a couple people that have his ear, and I'm sure he asked their opinion and their thoughts. You may know one of those guys, but I don't think it's just such a weird question. I can't say that he's out of touch because he's not trying to be in touch. He doesn't care what anybody else wants. He wants what he wants. And sometimes at the behest of his performers and his producers, etc. But it's his game, right? It's his game. It's his ball. You do it the way he wants you to do it, or you can find a job elsewhere. One thought that I have on the matter, and it's not as prevalent now with the weird situation we have with the audiences. But a thought that I had when we still had live audiences is that Vince is watching his shows on a monitor with a headset in. And I don't think the show ends and he's going back to his hotel room or his jet or whatever he's doing. And I don't think he's watching the show back. Right. I think he has too many other things to do than to go and watch a show that he's already watched. Yeah. So he's in production meetings all day. He has an idea of what the show is supposed to be, and he's watching that monitor, not even taking the crowd into, and not even considering them, because he's looking for something specific to happen or to not happen. And that is his connection with the product. This is what I think. And I think that's tough because, speaking as a performer, I've had matches where I go out and I think it's the best match I've ever had. And then I happen to watch it back and I am disappointed to realize that it was not the best match I've ever had. And I've had some matches that I thought were stinkers and was disappointed with and embarrassed by. And you happen upon those matches again and you're like, well, damn, that was not that bad. So it's possible for a person to have multiple perspectives on a situation. And I don't think the way things are set up there that he is giving himself that opportunity to have more than one perspective. I think he sees what happens at the time. He either loves it or he hates it. And then that's that. And there's not a lot of reflection on, did the fans like that? Were they happy with it? Did something magical happen that we can capitalize on? Or is that person someone that is never allowed to have a match again on live television? Right. So it's just an interesting thing. I don't know Vince well enough to know any of these things for sure, but that's something that I've pondered.
I'm curious. You said you met Vince a couple of times. Can you tell us about your interactions with Vince, however brief they may have been?
Very brief. The first time was a couple months after the Performance Center had opened, and Vince was there. I think maybe Steph was there. I'm not really sure. Probably the whole group, Hunter. And we had to pretend that the PC was, everybody's doing something in a ring. This ring is full. This ring is full. Everybody. And it's supposed to be a simulation of what goes on at the Performance Center, but it's absolutely not what goes on at the Performance Center, because you'd never get anything done because you wouldn't be able to hear anybody. There's stuff. Why would you have everybody in at the same time? They do that when they would have tours of the PC. So we've got people in this ring doing blow-up drills, people in this ring wrestling, people in this ring having a practice match, people in this ring stretching and doing rolls. And then I happen to be at the crash ring when Vince walks by. And I believe it was Sawyer Fulton, who no longer works for WWE. He works for Impact. Madman Fulton, I believe, is his name. Fellow Ohio guy. He is not a high flyer, but Bill DeMott thought it would be great to have Sawyer Fulton do a moonsault in the crash ring. And this is when I shake Vince McMahon's hand, is when 6'7", 285-pound guy that is not a moonsaulter is moonsaulting into the crash ring. And I'm just like, what a weird, bizarre situation this is. Nice to meet you, sir. And the second one, which is also a really surreal one, I posted a photo from backstage at WrestleMania in New York, New Jersey. That was, I'm blanking on the number. This was 2013, whatever number that was.
29.
There we go. 29. Yeah, you're correct. It was 29. And I was one of the trapped souls for the Undertaker's entrance. There was a handful of them. Yes, the hands, right? It's funny because I know which hands are mine, because I was the one directly to Undertaker's right. So we're wearing these morph suits, which are like, if you've ever seen Always Sunny in Philadelphia, it's like Green Man.
Yeah.
But we are wearing these red, and there's a couple black morph suits. It's myself, Rusev, Sami Zayn, Byron Saxton, Leo Kruger, The Ascension, Vader's son, Jesse White. There's a handful of us there. Eric Rowan, and Luke Harper, Brody Lee, all of us are there. And we're there the night before Mania because we're rehearsing this thing. I don't really know why, but whatever. And we're all wearing these stupid outfits, and we're goofing around. We've been there, for hours in these suits and whatever. And we're just, whatever. And then we hear Vince's voice. Like, we're 10 feet from Vince, and we're dressed like idiots, acting like idiots. So those are the two interactions that come to mind. Not that there was much of an interaction, but we were both in the same place at the same time more than once.
Ryan Burton wants to know, Chris, who are your favorite wrestlers growing up? What are your early memories of wrestling, and what made you become a fan?
Oh, man. My vivid memory of really starting to like wrestling was Royal Rumble 89. I knew that wrestling existed, but it's really hard to kind of dig into those thoughts because I knew the LJN figures. I knew what those were. I knew that Paul Orndorff did a pile driver. I don't know why that's a memory that I have. But it wasn't until Rumble 89 that I was like, man, how can I watch this all the time? The Royal Rumble was just so crazy with so many different crazy characters. And I think I was in third grade at the time. So from that moment, I started taping television every Saturday morning, which would be World Championship Wrestling, then WWF Superstars, and then whatever else I could get my hands on, primetime on Monday night. I would go to flea markets and garage sales and get old magazines that would fill me in on stuff from the mid and early 80s, even the late 70s. My mom got me this book from Walden Books at the Salem Mall in Dayton, Ohio, called The Complete Book of Wrestling. And it's this giant red book, and it has all these photos from George Napolitano and just these classic, iconic photos, mostly from 85, 86, 87. And it had bios of everybody. And that's, I think, where my fascination for like Bruiser Brody, the Abdullah the Butcher, the Missing Link, that's where my fascination with those guys started. Even though I wasn't seeing those guys on WWF TV, my first favorite was the Ultimate Warrior, because, man, he was just awesome. That music, he beat the shit out of people in like 2 minutes. He'd press slam them, splash them. I went to a couple WWF shows with Ultimate Warrior symbols on my cheek. Thanks, Mom. I would go to the shows at Hara Arena. I grew up in Dayton. So the first one that I went to was after WrestleMania 5. So there was like Rude and Warrior in a match. I think the first match I remember seeing live was Bad News Brown against the Blue Blazer. So to condense this a little bit, I was obsessed with wrestling from 89 till early 94 is what I'm going to say. And then I was getting into high school, so I just fell off. I just tuned out. It wasn't as interesting to me at that moment for whatever reason. I'm in high school. High school things are happening. Then my senior year, which was 97 to 98, I decided to pop on Nitro. And I started to watch weekly, and I was like, oh man, this is kind of cool. All right. People at school were talking about wrestling, which is never a thing that happened. And then after some months of Nitro, I eventually started to watch Raw again. And just by luck, I found out that there was going to be an independent show in Dayton, Ohio at the Nutter Center, right? Which is where the first King of the Ring was. And I thought, wow, that's cool. I got to go. So I went, and they informed me that the show was in the parking lot of the Nutter Center. So I had my first glimpse of independent wrestling, and maybe about 150-ish fans at this show. And it totally took away the intimidation of enrolling at like a power plant and having Sarge yell at you and make you do 1,000 squats. Like, it took that intimidation away from me. And I remember being at this show, and the wrestlers are like going back to the locker room, but it's not a traditional entrance. They're like going up steps and going up into the building. I remember following people like, hey, is there a place to train? What do I do? You know, I feel so dumb looking back on it, but I just must have bugged so many different people to figure out where to go. And sure enough, there was a place in Middletown, Ohio that was practically, you know, a garage with a ring was basically what it was. It was a wrestling school. And I made a visit there. I talked to them. I put the money down, and 2 months later, I had my first match. It was just really crazy to look back on. It happened like that. So when I got into wrestling and started having matches, I wasn't super smart to wrestling. Like, I knew it was a work and I knew that type of stuff, but I didn't know what a wrestling observer was. I didn't know Japanese wrestlers outside of Jushin Liger and Great Muta and Kaientai. I was learning about wrestling as I was a wrestler, which is really strange to look back on. There was a time when I didn't know anything about wrestling, and it's foreign to wrap my head around that now, but it all just happened super quick. And, you know, I'm graduating from high school, and then that September I have my first match at the Heartland Flea Market in Xenia, Ohio.
You mentioned the power plant. Did you ever call the number or write in or try to inquire about doing power plant stuff?
No, I had seen some sort of maybe like an Inside Edition type thing where they had somebody there and they were talking about the power plant. And I was like, that kind of sounds like Full Metal Jacket. Yes. Yeah. I don't want to go be Private Pile. But a cool thing was when I did go down to train with Dave Taylor, he had bought rings from the power plant when WCW closed. So wow. I did train in a power plant ring in Peachtree City, Georgia.
That's pretty fun. Michael McClanahan has a question. He says, what do you find to be the most rewarding aspect of training a talent? Do you ever find it more challenging to help someone else develop ideas for their character or persona, as opposed to coming up with ideas for your own character when you wrestle?
Man, I think all of it is so rewarding. If you have the right person that is really doing this for the right reasons and really enjoys it, I would say there are some things that you would not expect that are very difficult. And that can get discouraging when you have these big dreams of being a pro wrestler, and then something really simple is a sticking point for you. You're just kind of like, wow, if I can't do that, how am I going to do any of this? Right. So when one of those talents has a certain breakthrough, it is as exciting for me as it is for them. Because it's like you're achieving this victory together, especially because you know they can do these things.
Right.
You've seen it time and time again. I've had so many students over the years where you will see someone for 9 months and your gut kind of tells you, man, they haven't improved in 6 months. You really want them to, but you're like, man, I don't know if I can really see it. But I've seen people that have been stuck for a year, and then one day they come in and something is different, and then they just make this giant leap, and you look back on them, you're like, wow, I can't believe you're that same person that was having that difficulty. And then you have some people that are prodigious from day one, and then you think, oh my gosh, they're going to be the next whatever, and then they hit a sticking point somewhere. So you never really know. You can guess who's going to make it and who won't, but you really don't know, because I've seen so many different exceptions to these stories. And whenever they do well, man, whenever anybody that I have worked with or anyone that has asked for my opinion or my guidance, whenever any of those people have any modicum of success, it's a success for me too. I feel it. There was a question last episode where that asked if I had any resentment or anything toward, or any resentment about my peers achieving a certain level of success and me not doing that. I think back to WrestleMania 30, which was in New Orleans, where I was no longer employed by the company. And we had a gathering at some bar. I think it was sponsored by High Spots. There were a couple people, that I was with, and we're watching this. And Cesaro body slams Big Show's big ass over the top to the floor and wins that battle royal. And then Daniel Bryan goes on and just has an incredible career night and is holding the belts at the end of the night. And these are two guys that I spent a lot of time with on the road and in the ring. And I'm sure I didn't feel as good as they felt, but I felt pretty good watching those guys succeed. And when somebody that I've spent that time with succeeds, I feel a little bit of it too, because I don't mean like they owe anything to me, but it just feels good to see that, because, I feel part of that success because I have a certain connection with those people, and we may not even talk anymore, but I do know the time that we had spent together, and, it's like, one for the good guys. That's kind of what it feels like. So imagine that with somebody that you've seen from their first day of wrestling school, right? So that it's just such a good feeling. And I am, there is all kinds of shit going on in here. Most of it is pro wrestling related. So I can give you all the ideas in the world. And I think they're all great, but they're not all going to be great. And they're not all going to fit what you want to do. But when I come up with some kind of an idea that fits your character or fits the situation that you're in, and you go out there and you do it and it works, that is thrilling. That is so exciting. You just want to be like, you want to poke your head out of the curtain and be like, yeah, that was my idea. I told them to do that. So give me some credit. Which reminds me just of a little anecdote, and then I'll stop. Ian Rotten, booker, owner for IWA Mid-South, he booked so many dream matches throughout the mid-2000s, early 2000s, mid-2000s. Just he brought in so much exceptional talent from all over the world. And Ian he never saw a microphone that he was scared of, right? Every microphone was his best friend. So whenever, say, an AJ Styles and a Christopher Daniels tear it up and just have these great debuts at the TPI 2002, and the crowd's like, oh my God, that was incredible, awesome. Here comes Ian with the microphone to remind everybody who booked it. And I don't think that was always by design, but it was just, he's doing his bit to put those guys over. But like, we would always kind of joke about that a little bit, because it's like, Booker of the Year, but there's no shame in that. He did book a lot of great matches, so he should feel a little bit of that success too.
Well, this question here I wanted to ask the entire time we've been recording, but I kept thinking, man, this is probably its own episode. And if it is, maybe we'll just give a tease here, but you and I haven't talked about it. Don wants to know, how was John Zandig to work with in your time in CZW? What happened that led to you leaving CZW in 07? And if you're not familiar with him, throw him in your Google machine, but there's got to be some stories here.
Most of the time I worked for CZW, I had no dealings with Zandig. The first 2 shows that I did for CZW in 2002, he was the booker. He was the guy that I spoke with about working on the shows. But I didn't have any real connection with him. And my first couple shows for CZW left a very bad taste in my mouth. So I think my first match was with Ruckus, and it was just very disorganized. I had gotten a flat tire on the way to the show, so I was stranded in West Virginia for a couple hours getting that fixed. So I was communicating with him, listen, I'm still coming, but I'm going to be late. This was MapQuest printout direction days. This wasn't GPS. So we finally make it to the show, and my match has been canceled. So then Ruckus had come, I don't know if he came with, but he was going to wrestle his buddy Hurricane Kid on the show. So instead of scrapping the replacement match, he had Ruckus wrestle both matches, had Ruckus wrestle his buddy Hurricane Kid and wrestle me in the match that we ended up having, which I don't think Ruckus wanted to do. And I don't know if he was really injured, but there was just a portion of the match where he was limping and kind of sandbagging a little bit, and just was not the awesome East Coast debut that I was hoping for.
Right.
Then when I came back for Cage of Death as a surprise, I believe, I wrestled Nate Hatred and Nick Gage and was basically squashed. And that was because, you're in a match, you're in a tag match, there's 4 people, right? You can just cut things out. And it's not like you're in one-on-one with somebody who can prevent that. It's just like, oh, they cut out all my shit. Not only did they cut out all my shit, they lay me out after the match and put me through a table that wasn't supposed to happen. And I was just like, man, what the, and then I didn't get the impression of any malice after the match talking with these guys. But when I explained, like, man, what the hell, this, that, and the other, whatever, I got well, I thought it was good and walked away. So I'm like, man, fuck this place. I'm never going back here.
Right.
Mike Burns from Smart Mark Video had taken over booking for CZW. And he had put in a call to me, asked me if I wanted to come back. And I said no. And then Mike talked to me a little bit more and said, listen, it's different here. I'll get you in some good matches, yada, yada, yada. So I came back and I wrestled Trent Acid and Nate Hatred on the same night in 2 different singles matches. And then I became a regular and I started working, practically every month for them unless I was out of the country. And then the following summer, I moved to Pennsylvania. And then, of course, I could do every show. Good memories of CZW are the first time I had a tag match with Claudio, with Cesaro, was at CZW because I had formed this little faction with myself, Claudio, who was new in the States, and this guy by the name of Blackjack Marciano. He was Eddie Kingston's original tag team partner in a group called the Wild Cards. Kingston, Blackjack, the wild cards. So Kingston was already in his own group with like the Blackout guys. So I wanted to get Marciano in as well. So I had him and I had Claudio. And I had seen this bit. I'd seen this bit from ECW with Terry Funk where he had Ian and Axel Rotten as his few good men. So I cut these promos about these few good men, whatever. So they were basically my proteges. They wore my gear when they wrestled, and then they were in a tag gauntlet, and Marciano couldn't make it. He had a show earlier that day and car broke down. He couldn't make it. So I ended up teaming with Claudio just to fill the match. And we had good chemistry. We teamed together a little bit more, but then CZW was kind of the first place that had us team. Eventually we ended up teaming in Chikara, and that worked out as it did. There were some great CZW crowds over the years, just some awesome reactions. There were some crazy spectacles match-wise too, when it comes to like the Cages of Death and such. The last straw for me was post CZW Ring of Honor angle, which was 100% me on the CZW end, and then also Gabe Sapolsky on the Ring of Honor end. Zandig wanted nothing to do with that, and he was offended that I would even mention Ring of Honor on the microphone. It was just this whole debacle. Once that angle ended, I stayed with CZW for a little while, and there was a dispute between Zandig and Mike Burns. Mike Burns got kicked out as booker. So now it's back to Zandig and whoever was helping him at that time. He had a couple people. And there was, I don't know, I was just unhappy with the way certain things were being booked, the way things were being handled. And the last straw was watching a main event between Nick Gage and Justice Payne, two of the CZW originals. They were also brothers. And it's this big main event that is, it's the main event. It's a title match, right? And Justice Payne gets pissed at his brother, and he gives him kind of like a funky angle slam and throws him down on his head and just pins him in like 7 minutes of this main event. There's also a table in the ring that hasn't been broken. So you can imagine how upset the crowd was. They were chanting refunds. They were chanting all kinds of stuff. And then to save the show, Zandig got Drake Younger to make a challenge and come out and, wrestle an additional match. He had already wrestled that night. He had, it was changed out of his gear, and then was like, "Hey, can you go to the ring and wrestle right now?" And then of course he's scared. He's like, "Hey, yeah, sure." So he goes out there in like his tennis shoes, and then Justice Payne proceeds to almost kill this guy. He gives him an awesome bomb from the ring through the floor, that wasn't quite what happened. Through a table, but he kind of overshot the table and landed on his head and neck, and was just completely unprofessional and just awful. Just really, unprofessional is all I'll say. I was furious. I was, cursing up a storm in the back, whatever. I got pulled aside later, like, "Hey, what's your problem?" Whatever. So that next show, I was kind of thinking about leaving. I've got this pull apart thing going on with Eddie Kingston. And then I just take the microphone. I knew we were going to wrestle the following show. And I just said, "Hey man, this place isn't big enough for the two of us. You and I, loser leaves." So I shot that on the microphone because I wanted to get the hell out of there. And what happened was we're getting ready to go out for this loser leaves CZW match the following month. And Zandig pulls us aside and he's like, "Yeah, I want to come in and lay out Kingston after the match, whatever." And in my head, I'm like, dude, just let us have this fucking moment. Like,
right.
Why? He thought that Kingston was going to double cross and leave to Pro Wrestling Unplugged, which was the Backseat Boys promotion also in Philly, which to my knowledge wasn't going to happen. So Kingston and I have this match. this really emotional, hard-hitting match, and then the match is over. I've lost, and then here comes Zandig, and then Kingston rolls out of the ring. We're both gone, and then Zandig fires Kingston. So I lost, the loser leaves. Kingston won, but he also left CZW. So it's just indicative of what a clusterfuck that place had become. And I had a lot of good times there, but that was the time for me to leave. I did come back. I had 2 more matches with them. I think maybe like 2010 and late 2013. But yeah, I was done with CZW.
Well, and we're done with this week's episode, but before we get out of here, we've got 2 things that are sort of becoming a tradition here on Can Chris Hero Save Wrestling? First, your words of wisdom, Mr. Hero. What do you got for us this week?
So I spoke about this a little bit earlier, and I'll just tie it in here too. Don't be afraid to wrestle. Right? Don't be afraid to wrestle in your wrestling match. Not everything has to be a kick and a punch. It's okay to kick. It's okay to punch, but don't do it without having a legitimate reason to do it. All right? If you're getting out wrestled every time you take a turn, like, yeah, punch the guy in the face, kick the match into the next gear. And then also, I don't mean wrestle just to wrestle and ignore the crowd, but tell a story with your wrestling. Take that time and lock up and work around a little bit. Work to your strengths. Work to your opponent's strengths. Obviously, don't go against what you're being booked to do for your match, but I just think everybody is so quick to get to the good part of the match that the good part's not as good because you haven't warmed the audience up enough. And man, all it takes is just a little bit. Set that table. Like I said, don't try to fit 10 minutes into 5 minutes, right? Plan for 10 and then finish the match at 5, right? So I guess that's just my little bit right there. I can go into depth more at a later date, but don't be afraid to wrestle. Just go out there, and that's what it is, right? It's a pro wrestling match. You both have trained to pro wrestle. Start with a collar and elbow, and just work a little bit before you start getting to the good stuff. Because if you do, you'll make the good stuff even gooder.
Well, let's talk about some gooder music. Last week, you dropped an old school classic that I loved for us. Beanie Siegel, The Truth. What do you got for us this week to play us out, bud?
I am going even older school with a tandem by the name of Eric B. and Rakim. Mm-hmm. This song is Juice, and it is off the Juice soundtrack, and it is just such an anthem. I love this song so much. I vividly remember going out and purchasing the cassette tape of the Juice soundtrack. Juice is a movie with Tupac and Omar Epps. The soundtrack has a couple really good songs. There's another song by Naughty by Nature on that album that I really like. But just check this out. It's a good blood pumping song. It holds up now. It doesn't sound like old school. If you are not familiar, I suggest you check it out. And if you are familiar, put it on anyway, because it's a good one.
Here it is, Juice. We'll see you next week right here on Can Chris Hero Save Wrestling. I stole that from Anchorman, by the way. We'll see you next week.